Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about the structure and functions of the brain. So let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. Now, the first thing we want to begin to point out is that the first 4 or 5 videos, I mean, they were fairly short, 5, 6, 7 minutes in there, but that's about to change. The rest of these are going to be fairly lengthy. As a matter of fact, one video I had to cut in half, and even that, those 2 halves are fairly lengthy. So we're about to get into the depth of the information, and this video is going to focus on actually linking the different areas of the brain with their function or their purpose. So you're really going to see what is controlled by what in this video. And as a reference point as far as note taking, one, there's going to be a bunch. I'm just going to tell you that right now. And that the other way is that I'm going to be talking more location. There's no use to me just reading the screen to you. That's a disservice to you, and just extend the video out even longer. So I'm going to be talking location. So while you'll be collecting the notes, and if I'm done with this screen and ready to move on, you just hit the pause button and collect the rest of it, and then hit play again and go from there. But I'll be doing location and examples, maybe metaphorical ways to help, and you'll just be collecting the notes and restarting once you're ready. But you can see the different areas, and again, referencing this cerebrum, which is at top, 2/3, the cerebellum there in the back, and the midbrain, the pons. The pons, man, you're gonna see that the pons, the cerebellum is pretty. The cerebellum is pretty important. But the pons, for no bigger than it is, you've got that tadpole looking shape over there, that big kind of a hump there with the green hanging down there, the lower parts of the upper parts of the brainstem and stuff. The pons, man, it covers a whole bunch of stuff. And if you want a little insight as to, like teenage development, I'm not going to reference it like it's, it's making you guys crazy or whatever, but when we look at the pons and you look at all that it does, and at some point in a teenager's life, all those things start to really develop kind of almost at once, and so it really creates some, as most of you would certainly could recognize, a kind of just a series of just feelings and emotions and craziness. But anyway, that's the life of a teenager, developing from younger into adulthood and all that goes with it. Alright, so this is a rundown of kind of all the structure and the shape. So if we start from the very bottom, the purple down there, or purplish, it's the top of the spinal cord, and then it goes color-coded from then with the medulla oblongata, kind of the top of the stalk there of the spinal cord, and then you got the pons area, which I references, has a lot of stuff associated with it. And the yellow things, those are the cranial nerves, so we're going to talk about those, and you can see them listed on the right-hand side. Starting with the optic tract there, and then the rest of those optical nerves. And again, video 10 will reference all that, talking about where they are. But then you got the midbrain, which is kind of the upper part of the pons and the lower part of that that orangish area there, kind of the top of the pons up to the thalamus. And in the blue, the diencephalon, the hypothalamus, the thalamus area. A lot going on there as well, but all that kind of sets. If you feel back here, obviously you can feel your spinal cord there, and where the base of it, you can feel the beginning of the skull. That's the purple area. That's that spinal cord, and then inside there is the medulla, and then the pons, and then the midbrain, working your way up, and the diencephalon in there as well. So. Alright, so starting with the bottom, the medulla. Yeah, obviously it's going to be receiving signals, and a lot of these have as part of their function conduct signals up and down, because everything conducts signals to some point. They're all going to be receiving at some point in time, even if they're not part of the decision-making process, because of where the gray matter is all interconnected, it passes through there at some point in time. So they're kind of all going to have that conduct signals up and down kind of stuff, because they all do that. But the midbrain is more about between the brainstem and the cerebellum, that connection there, automatic functions, heart rate, as it says, blood pressure, respiration, a lot of those things that you do, but you don't want to control, you don't have control over. You wouldn't want to have to think about just telling your heart to beat. I mean, you tell it to beat, and then you just would constantly be doing that, and you wouldn't get anything else done. And if you had to do your heart rate and your lung respiration, that would take up the entire day, because you couldn't afford not to do those. Maybe oxygen for a little bit, while you did some other things and you weren't thinking about it, but it wouldn't be long before you're right back at that as well. But that's the medulla. Here's medulla part 2, more of the structure side of it, and you can see it's like those pink lines that are hanging down there, or running down at the very bottom. The top of them, kind of like what your own leg muscles, if you want to think about that, leg muscles. And then you got the thigh muscles, a little bit thicker, but those long lines going down the center of that diagram. And the medulla, largest nerve tract, as it says, traits can cross over, and no, I got off track. I wasn't paying attention. Let me fix this here. Let's see. I don't want to be there. I want here. Yeah, that's where I want to be. That's my fault. I wasn't following along. Pons and midbrain. Okay, now we're back on track. Sorry about that. Maybe I'll edit that part out. No, I probably won't. So the pons, as I mentioned, just look at that list of things that it is responsible for. I mean, sleep, equilibrium, taste, facial expressions, chewing, swallowing, urination, saliva and tears, maintaining posture. Man, a lot of things going on there as part of that. So it's just got a lot going on, but you can see where it is. It's right above the medulla. It's got that big section again. When you looked at it in other screens, it's like these big muscly things, but that's the pons, in charge of a lot of things. So just the idea of standing upright, okay, facial expressions, and again, this isn't. This obviously is our muscles that do that, but they're the brain control centers that control those features. Okay, and then the midbrain, which again is right above those stalks that are kind of running this way off the pons up to the thalamus. That's the midbrain. Again, you can see pain as part of that process. Visual attention. So when students aren't paying attention, maybe I need to say, hey, straighten up your midbrain. Get your midbrain going again. But that's the midbrain. All right. So the thalamus, again, we've referenced the thalamus, or we've spoken those words a few times. It's the idea of super important, that in the hypothalamus. I mean, the messages they get from the brain, I mean, they're in charge of so much. They're a huge part of the endocrine system. They're a huge part of all the hormones that are released, all of the things that are used to regulate different parts, different aspects. But you can see them now in the midbrain. It's a pretty small picture. You can see the location, but it's right in that center of the dicephalon that we've looked at a couple of times, and we're going to see it again on the next screen. But pain, and everything, auditory, visual, all that stuff. Again, don't want to read that to you. You can certainly write that down, and if you need more time, just pause. Alright, so hypothalamus, again, you can see the center of that diagram, the thalamus, the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is just below. It's almost like in a little cube. You got the pituitary gland hanging down there, then you got the V, kind of the hypothalamus. There's a little bit of a lock at some time, and then the dicephalon, the thalamus, is up above that. Huge part of endocrine system, as we mentioned. But anytime the brain needs an adjustment to a homeostasis situation, the hypothalamus is where it turns to. Alright, so continue the hypothalamus, and again, lots of things, digestive, hunger, thirst, and sleep patterns, body temperatures, rage, aggression, sex drive, all that stuff. Man, just filling the emotional bank up with all kinds of high level, we talk about rage and sex drive, hunger. I mean, get yourself some hangry because of the hypothalamus. But a super important area, and again, we referenced its location a couple of times now. Okay, cerebellum, again, right back here, and you can see that section right over here. But again, we talked about how much it has, over 50% of the neurons, small amount of the waste, but a huge part of everything that gets done or is done. It's got that arbor vitae that we talked about earlier about the cerebrospinal fluid, kind of coating that you can capture that information. Alright, cerebellum, again, you can read, like, there's a reference to ADHD, and on one of the research findings for that. So knowing about that connection, that's something that can always be monitored. And again, you can see everything there, but as far as location, you got the pons, okay, back in here, and you got this cerebellum right up against the skull area, inside the cerebrospinal fluid, of course. But again, super important, balance, motor coordination. So now we're talking more moving, planning, that kind of stuff. Alright, again, looking for the cerebrum. I mean, largest part, we talk about it being that upper 2/3. And then on the next slide, next few scenes, we're going to get into the individual parts of it. But we've seen this picture a couple of times. Just be sure you capture the information. And I'll meet you at the next one. All right, so the frontal lobe, so this is when we're really going to break down what's going on. Voluntary motor functions, motivation, foresight. So these are all really perceptual brain processes. These are not hardcore, digestion, heartbeat. I mean, these are really abstract thoughts, motivation. These things, memory, and of course the parietal lobe. Those are the ones that are up front, occipital ones in the back. But again, be sure you capture the information of what they do. All right, and so for the rest of the temporal lobe, these are the ones that are on the side. Obviously, hearing, smelling, learning, and again, memory. And of course, the insula, right below that area, inside. That's the idea. But again, capture those. I mean, to think that all these processes to process taste and understanding spoken languages, and even the artistic ability that the cerebellum does with, or cerebellum. I mean that's pretty high level abstract thought processes that the brain's responsible for, but yet can't see any real circuitry. You can't see any location. Not like it's a file folder or like a computer where there's wires and drives and things moving all around. So be sure you capture all that information, because there's lots of multiple choice questions there on our test. Well, that's our video over structure and functions of the brain. Again, lots there, I know. I'm sure you had a couple of full pages there. So on our next video, we're going to be talking about internal components of the brain. We'll see you then.